You are, as I look left and right, you are. No, but what I love is I love the return guests because you get to see the update to their life, to their journey, as well as a lot of people get to understand that you guys are actually like my friends more than my
Yes.
network and things like that, right? So it's always good to have that connection.
And then you get to see the progression that we're really real people with real issues, with real topics, with real life.
Yeah, sometimes when you get the one off, maybe the two, it's like, okay, they told their story and what happens? It's like a TV show, right?
Yes.
Season one, we're season two. Like, when is this person gonna come back? I want an update, right? These are the updates.
Exactly. And then these are the ones that people go, oh, that series is ending? No way.
I know, right? So, you know what? Let's jump right into this because you've been on a number of trips. You've been around the world. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I want to bring everyone up to speed. So, do me a favor, reintroduce yourself, tell my audience a little bit about who you are, and of course, where they can find you.
Absolutely. Well, I am Bambi Lynn. I am a three-time published author. My first book was my memoir that I wrote in my 50s, and my third book just came out on July 4th. I also am a event planner. I'm also a public speaker, and I am a life coach, and I'm a mother of 6 adult children and 15 grandchildren now, and I'm just living life to the fullest.
I like that you ended with that I'm living life to the fullest. As I got older, the simple things mean so much more to me in my life. So let's say you're a little bit older than I am. How can
Hey,
someone
hey, hey,
then,
hey, hey.
sorry, she's a little bit younger than I am.
I don't mind.
She's
I'm
in
55. I don't care.
she's 25. That's
Yeah.
an error. There's a sound error on her end. For those who are 25 and older, 30 and older, and 40 and older, what are some of the ways that you found peace and happiness later on in your life?
Getting rid of the residue of the past. I just did, I took a challenge that I would do 100 videos challenge talking about my brand healing through stories. And I just told the story about how when I was in my 20s, I had a pressure canner blow up on me. And when the pressure canner blew up on me, I had to be in a burn unit and they put you on a metal bed, they tie your hands and your feet, and they jack you up with morphine to get rid of the residue in the dead skin. They have to get rid of the residue in the dead skin in order for the new skin to grow. So I have been on that journey of allowing that dead skin and the residue of that skin to come on to have new skin, to have new purpose, to have a new life. Trauma doesn't define you, because I just did an event this past weekend and I told the women, I said, if I was to ask each one of you a question and say, I want you to stand up if this relates to you, every single one of you would have stood, because trauma and life sucking is universal. But what's not universal is people getting up to want to heal, because we have a tendency to hang on to our trauma like a blanket or like a good friend. But it's when you let that go, and it's when you release it, and when you decide to say, this isn't my death sentence, I'm not living there anymore. I'm going to start marching forward into my life, kind of like Viola Davis. When Viola Davis wrote her memoir, her counselor said to her, Viola, your 8-year-old little girl already went through all of that for you. And she did that for you so you could live today. I'm at that point in my life that I am living today because that 8-year-old little girl already did it for me. She already conquered it all, already dealt with my pain and my trauma. And now I get to be the best version of that little girl. I get to be the one that's 55 years old, living the best life possible because she took care of it all for me.
Does peace and happiness look different to you today than it did, let's say, in your 20s?
Oh my goodness, I would never want to go back to my 20s in the first place. Like, oh my goodness, who would ever want to do that? But in my 20s, I was dealing with a lot. You have to remember, I'm a mom of 6, and I had all of my children in my 20s. I moved 14 times in my 20s. I went through 2 divorces in my 20s. Oh my goodness, a lot of my trauma happened in my 20s. I would never, ever want to be a 20-year-old thinking that I knew it all then in your 20s. You think you have arrived in your 20s. And even like parenting, like you tell grandparents what they're going to do, what they're not going to do, how they're going to take care of your children, how they're not going to, don't do this, don't give them candy, don't do this. And then you become a grandparent and you realize that's all that I have to offer them today. So you allow grandparents finally to be grandparents. And I wish that I would have, I wish I would have been nicer, to my children's grandparents instead of trying to have them be more like me as their parent. Being in your 20s, we just don't know anything and we think we know it all. And in your 50s, you realize you don't know anything, but you're going to live your life to the fullest.
I will always say that as you approach your 40s,
Yes.
I say two things happen in life. One, all that nonsense that maybe you accepted and tolerated before then, you don't have the time for that anymore. You're like,
No.
nope. That's people, places, and things.
Yeah, that's
Right?
restaurants and waitresses.
Absolutely. And that's neighbors and people on public transportation as
Yeah,
well.
they're
Right? And the second thing
exactly.
is you begin to understand yourself in a way that I know what I want. I know how to
Mhm.
get there. Let me work towards that. Um,
Absolutely.
do you like what kind of obstacles do you see people encountering as they approach maybe the later years in life to understand that they're the designer of their own peace and happiness?
I don't think the older generation has a problem of that. I think the 20s and your 30s has a problem with that of understanding. But I do think I agree with you. When you're in your 40s, especially for a woman that has children and things like that, you are now leaving that time period of young children, of, soccer games, of everything. So now in your 40s and your 50s, you now have time to look in the mirror and really look in the mirror of yourself. You now have time to see where you have been and where you're going. But when every Tuesday I hang out with women that are between 60 and 92 years old. So life still happens. Life is still hard, but they already know that life is going to take its course. So they already know the valleys and the mountains and the roller coaster, and they're not afraid of them. They know that they have to go through them, but they don't sit around anymore wondering, oh, how am I going to get through it? How am I going to get through it? Because they're 83 years old and they've realized they've already gone through it. It's such a great, peaceful place to be, but they do still care about things. There is one person in our group that's 83 years old and she's dating somebody that's 79. And we all think it's the cutest thing, but she just went away to another country with this gentleman and his ex-wife was there. And she came back and I was like, so how was it? She goes, well, she's heavier than I am. So that was a plus. I'm like, so we still care about those things. So women still care about those things. So that was kind of encouraging, but yet kind of funny to the fact that women still care, about all the little details of our lives. And there's a little bit of competition, between us still. So that was kind of cool.
You mentioned that we're not afraid or we don't have that fear anymore as we get older and begin to maybe have more control of identity. Do you see the other side as that as well, where women are fearful of getting older and maybe not having that type of control?
I think so. I have a girlfriend that I had a conversation with the other day, and she said, I just took a picture, and there was a lot of things that have happened in her life that have like taken and added more wrinkles, to her face and stuff, and she said, I see a picture of me 10 years ago versus a picture of me today. And she said, and it's so hard, because now we are getting older, but now our lives, we want to live our life. It's like we're on this mouse whatever those things are called, those things that a mouse is on, that we're running out of time and we want to do so much, but yet our body is not functioning the way that it's supposed to function. Our knees are not allowing us to climb the mountain that we had climbed 10 years ago. Our face is starting to now change and it's wrinkled and we're starting to lose our beauty, in that aspect. But our beauty has grown. So like, I look at myself today and then I see myself in my 20s. I am so much more prettier today and more confident today than I was in my 20s, because now I have history attached to this face. I have history attached to the cellulite and into, the mushroom top. I have history to that, and I have history that I'm really proud of. And I'm really proud of the person that I am today. I'm proud of the work that I have done. And I'm proud of the fact that I can laugh my butt off at myself, and that the wrinkles that are growing is because I do laugh, and because I have been through things in my life, and I am who I am today. And I look in the mirror now and I'm like, wow, I actually aged well. When I see my ex-husbands, they didn't age well at all.
I shared with someone that the gray hair that I have in my beard are strands of wisdom and experience.
Absolutely.
Right. And I would not trade them for anything else. And I also shared, someone interviewed me and I told them that as you age, you find your value and your beauty in things that was so much more different than in your 20s. In your 20s is probably your physical looks, because you didn't have the experience, you didn't have the knowledge,
Yes.
maybe. As we get older now, it's, ooh, I find value in emotional awareness, emotional
Yes.
availability, in the experience, in the wisdom. What are some of the ways that you find value in yourself these days?
Oh my goodness. Well, I have become a pretty good writer. I'm pretty impressed with myself. I have become a pretty good writer. When my seventh grade teacher, took me into her room and told me that someday that I was going to write and going to represent, our school, I didn't have any idea and any clue of what that was going to be. With my third book coming, that my third book came out, I had a girlfriend that said, Bambi, your first two books, you can hear yourself. You could hear you. Like, we're sitting at the table, and that's how I write. Like, we're sitting at the table and I'm having a conversation and you could hear me. But my third book, which I wrote, The God Who Sees, and it was about 33 women of the Bible. And she said, I can hear the Holy Spirit in that book. I can hear him taking you on a journey and showing you the lives of these women, and you have captivated them in a way that other people can feel them. She goes, so your writing has so improved greatly. And so my writing is just made my, plus I travel. Before we got on this call, we said we're going to talk about that, because I became part of the 8%, and the 8% in the United States are the people that have traveled all 50 states in the United States. And I just, this past week, became part of that group. My two states that I had left to do was Oklahoma and New Mexico. And I had an event that I had to teach at in near Dallas, Texas. So I went to Oklahoma and I went to New Mexico to finish, my 50 states this past summer. And this is the only way that it made it possible, is because this past summer, my daughter and her husband and my grandchildren, her husband is in the military, and they, in March or April, they were told that they are now going to be stationed in Alaska. And I moved to Georgia to be with my daughter because this was supposed to be their last duty station. And my daughter called me, told me that she was moving to Alaska. I cried for 2 days because I'm like, are you kidding me? I moved here and now you're moving. But your audience doesn't know that I lost my job last year, which will be a year. It will be a year, October 14th, that I had lost my job with the Nielsen TV ratings. So for 2 days, I sat in a fetal position crying because, oh my goodness, how can she have gone, leave me? But the next couple of days after I had like go, okay, okay, God, I'm okay with this. She called me and she said, would you be willing to drive our car and the boys, and we drive the U-Haul, because the military wasn't going to be able to get their stuff to Alaska until December. So I said, all right. So I planned this trip, this 5,500-mile trip that we drove through the United States into British Columbia, into the Yukon, and into Alaska. So that was a trip. I still can't even comprehend all that happened on that trip, because it was a lot. And anybody that has traveled in British Columbia and traveled the Yukon, would understand that that is the last frontier. There is nothing like the Yukon. Their restrooms, there's nothing like their restrooms, because it's just a porta potty, nothing else. There is nothing like the scenery that you're going to see, but you are alone, because there's no internet, there's no radio, there's no phones. If you don't have a walkie-talkie, you're in trouble, because you don't hear anything. But the beauty and what you're going to see will take your breath away. So I tell you that only because the only way that this came possible is because Alaska was my 47th state. And I would have never thought that I would ever get to Alaska, because Alaska is very expensive. People that don't know that, it's extremely expensive. We stayed in a hotel that was $600 a night, and it was a cheap hotel. But because Alaska during the summer, Fairbanks and everybody wants to be there. So I never dreamed that I would finish the 50 states until I went to Alaska, until God showed me that, Bambi, I order your steps. I have it all taken care of. I figure it out for you. And when he figured that out, it gave me the opportunity to be able to finish, the two other states, and to become part of the 1%, the 8%. I did become part of the 1% in Alaska, because my grandson and I went onto the Dalton Highway to go to the Arctic Circle. Like, you might as well live life. So that was so I have been able to travel. I've been on most of Route 66. I really want to do it next year, because it's the 100th anniversary of Route 66 in the United States. And it is so amazing. I mean, the icons, it is just such a cool experience if people can go and do the Route 66.
I will advise anyone who hasn't done this already. Traveling is such an experience. From the
Yes.
cultures to the land to the people to the history. What it does for you is, it's basically, to me, food for the soul.
Oh, absolute. That is so true. Food for the soul. The other thing is, I heard a statement that said, if you want to hate your country, continue to listen to the news. If you want to learn to love your country, travel through it. And that is so, so true. Traveling, there's something that it does for you. Meeting people. I went to group, yeah, you told us, you did say, Bambi, are we like for an hour, or what are we doing? So, so I went to Groom, Texas, which is on Route 66. And Groom, Texas is the tallest cross on Route 66. And when you go there, there is the 12 stages of Christ's crucifixion. And then there is the table, and they're all made out of steel, I think, steel or copper. But you go around, and then there's the table. There's also a part there that they do a memorial for the unborn child, and Jesus is kneeling down with his hand open, with an unborn child in his hand, and tears coming down his face. That was pretty amazing and pretty touching. But then you go up to you walk up these stairs, and there's three crosses, the three crosses. So I'm sitting there, and then I just had this urge to, just get down on my knees and lift my hands up, and, at the foot of the cross. And it was like, I can't explain the feeling, the goosebumps. And then I opened up my eyes and there was a woman standing there and she goes, oh, don't stop because of me. And she wanted to take a picture of the cross. So then she begins to tell me her story and her testimony, how God saved her marriage and how her husband wanted the marriage to be ended and God saved her marriage. And her and I, total strangers, never knew each other, grabbed each other's hand and prayed for each other at the foot of the cross. There is nothing like that. Nobody, you can't explain it. You can't but there was a God moment. And I think that our country and people miss moments. They miss God moments when they just sit in their own homes or they sit in front of the TV listening to the garbage that is trying to divide our countries and trying to divide us individually through culture, through color, through sex or whatever. They're trying to divide us. When really, if you go and you travel, we are more united than you ever want to believe. We all have stories. We all have things that have been through. And when you travel, you get to meet those people. You get to meet them at the table and hear their stories and realize the countries want to divide us, but the people, we are not divided.
That reminds me of when I went to Indonesia a number of years ago, and you speak about moments, and I had a moment there where I was so involved in the culture that I had the cultural clothing on. And the highlight of that trip, and maybe one of my highlights of my life, was that there's a group of people who have like a water temple, and they allowed me to enter the water temple and they allowed me to do the 12 prayers at each water fountain. Right. And remember, this is someone that is a foreigner. This is like people, like some people could go there, but not everyone is allowed to do that. So
Now, were you
I,
a Christian at the time?
no, no, no. So it was an amazing experience because you're in your outfit and then you go there, you're in the water and you do a prayer at each fountain. And bam, let me tell you when I took in that experience, it didn't matter what my hair was, what my skin color was, how I looked, where I was from. It was black, white, pink, purple, green, all doing the same thing in unison. And it reminds me of that moment because you begin to realize once you leave where you are, all that you want as you get older is the peace, is the happiness, is the fulfillment of life because you don't have all on an unlimited amount of years left for
Yes.
the craziness, for the madness, right? It's just the moments. So how important are those moments in life, especially as we want to cherish them as we get older?
Ah, I just, it, I know for me, it's created a new person. The person, when I believe that God formed me in my mother's womb and he knew me and he destined me and he called me, I'm now looking at that calling. I'm now seeing his hand from the creation of time of who he created me to be. And he used all this stuff, this 50-year worth of stuff to show me that he knitted me in my mother's womb and he called destiny into me and he called purpose into me. I am now being able to see, that purpose. When I was 28 years old, and I don't know if we talked about this before, but when I was 28 years old, I had a dream, I had a vision or whatever you want to call it, that I was asked to speak and I went onto this stage. And when I looked out to the audience, everybody in the audience were damaged. They smelled, they were homeless, they had ratty clothes on. And then there was words written across their chest: unworthy, unloved, nobody likes me, ugly. All the words that that you want to speak to, that we've spoken to ourselves over and over again throughout the years, or we've allowed people to do it to us. And as I began to start speaking, I began to start sharing my testimony. I saw the audience change. I saw the aroma of the room change to lilacs. And not many people know what lilacs are, but that sweet, sweet smell, aroma. And I saw new words written across their chest: blessed, beloved, daughter of the king, forgiven, set free. And I am now seeing, and that was when I was in my late 20s at 28 years old. I am now seeing that vision come to pass. I am now seeing God using me in the lives of people and changing their narrative. You know, God had it from the foundations of time, and he formed it from the foundations of time, and he called me into where I am. But now in my 50s, I'm beginning to see the hand of God move over what he had called me to do. And there's nothing like it. You know, like my girlfriend said, Bambi, I don't know whether the vision that God gave to you so many years ago was actually for a big platform. I believe that God has set you apart one person at a time. And those one persons are ending up in your auditorium because you've spoken life to them, and their words are changing because you have spoken life. You may not be a Joyce Myers that have thousands and thousands of people in one room. God's giving you one by one and two by two. And now they're coming into the auditorium because you have shared the gospel and you have shared what God has done to you. So it's giving me a boldness. It's giving me a desire. I don't want to talk about politics, but, you know, there was a gentleman that was assassinated just recently, and totally, I love Jesus and I'm bold about my faith, but that incident made me bolder. That incident made me say, you know what? There's not a lot of time here. And I want to bring many to heaven. I want to be somebody that when they get to heaven, they go, Bambi was willing to share the gospel with me. She was willing. She stopped me in Groom, Texas, and wanted to share. I want to be that person. I don't want to die not bringing people with me. And I think that the older you get, if you have a faith, if you have a desire to serve Jesus, that becomes even more like a hunger, you know, for you, because you know your time is limited. You know, you think in your 20s, which this gentleman probably thought he was going to have 50 years. You know, we had 31. You know, we don't know when we're going. So our life is but a vapor. Then you get passionate about things. I love creek walking. I love creek walking. I'm 55 years old and I love creek walking. Not something that you would think that I would love to do, but I love to creek walk. I just think it's just an amazing experience. And now I don't care who's looking. I could care less who's looking at my, you know, my varicose vein legs or my cellulite, but I don't care anymore. I want to go creek walking, but I would have cared in my 20s and my 30s, but I don't care. And I want to live passionately. And I think that the older you get, for me, I don't want to look at the cup half empty. It is always half full. It just needs more. It's just looking for more room for me to, you know, for me to grow. I just, and if people can, I just hope that, you know, this is the third time that I've been on and the third time that we've had these kind of really cool conversations. And I hope that when people walk away from our conversations, that they feel rejuvenated, that they feel excited, you know, about their lives and what they can do, you know, for their lives and for the kingdom.
Do you think some people miss the special moments in their life because they're too busy with things of society, such as work and other things?
Absolutely. You know, when I lost my job at Nielsen, I loved my job because I got to be in people's homes, you know, for the last 15, 16 years of my life. I got to sit down in people's tables. But I realized when I left Nielsen, I realized that jobs could end up being a cult, you know, keep you confined and keep you only thinking about your job. It's like, you know, and they don't want you to go anywhere else this way. When you have a job, you have your phone attached to you when you're on vacation. It's kind of, you know, they're checking up on you. They're making sure you're doing this, that. I just think that sometimes jobs are cults, you know, that they don't want you to walk away from anything that they're doing. And I realized that even though I loved Nielsen, Nielsen took my life, you know, and I gave my life. And the other thing is, they not only took it, but I also gave it, because people are always waiting and they're always saving for the next day. I lived in plenty. Now I have to pray for my daily bread, wondering, okay, God, what are you going to do? But I am happy, but I'm refreshed and, you know, like I'm rejuvenated. I just have to find a job that, or a mission or something that's going to be able to still let me be me and do this, because I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose me again.
I shared with someone earlier this week that I've given 15 years to a job. And then because the person was asking me questions, and then I asked them, I shared with them, I give 15 years to this job. How many years have I given to my passion? How many years have I
Mm,
been given to these moments? And it doesn't equal the 15 years. And I shared with her that right after the pandemic, I had a rediscovering of my identity. 2022, I realized that I was imbalanced as I got older because in my 20s and my early 30s, it was let me do the 40 hours, let me do the 60 hours because I was building myself up. But
yeah.
I kept on that trajectory until I realized, okay, there's other things that I love to do. I'm not giving the amount of time to. And I think as you and we talked about this throughout this conversation, I think late 30s and early 40s is that point where because based on the research is that your career may change, your family dynamics may change. There's so many changes that people go through. Your health may change as well. We need to stay balanced. What are some of the ways that you stay balanced in your life these days?
Mm. I by giving myself the opportunity to be myself and to find my passions. Right now, for so long I cooked a lot when I was a young mother because, that's what I did. Now I find the passion to recook again, and to do it because I want to and to do it because I'm passionate about it. I For Christmas this year, I'm not giving my grandchildren, toys or things this year because I just find that this generation is so different than my generation. Christmas in my generation was the only time you got the new clothes, the new toys, the new socks. This generation, they get it every day, so they don't appreciate the things that you pour into them. And, experiences are what I want to continue to do. When I went to Alaska, my grandson, I was leaving the day before, and I have two grandsons that are there, but one of my grandson, he's 10, and he is my little buddy. I love all of my grandchildren, but there's just a little bond that we have together because we go on adventures together. And we were walking, and he was with his friend, and he told his friend, he says, my Nana's leaving tomorrow, so we need to really pray because my Nana won't have her adventure buddy. And I think it's really going to hurt my Nana. And I was like, oh my word, my grandson, like for him to even like comprehend, the impact that he has on my life and that he cared so much, then he knows that I want experiences. I want to go to the Arctic Circle. I mean, some people never, it doesn't even comprehend. It doesn't even have a desire for them. I want to see Route 66. I want to see the weird things, and experience them. I want to write about them. I'm writing my fourth book about travel. I want to do those things. I want to impact people's lives. I want to meet strangers and share the gospel with strangers in places that I only dreamed of going to as a little girl, or I didn't even dream as a little girl because I didn't know how big the world was. I don't want to miss anything now. I want to experience it all, and I don't even know what experience it all means until I say I'm having a girlfriend over for dinner tomorrow and let's make lasagna. That's the experience that I want to experience. But I didn't know that until I woke up this morning that that's the experience that I wanted. So sometimes we're looking for experiences when experiences are there every day of our lives. We just have to know how to take them and to embrace them. I just want to live life to the fullest. And I want to die with a smile on my face. I want to die like my children say, my mother, if there was one person that lived life, it was my mom. And if there is one person that shared her faith and she wasn't afraid to share her faith anywhere she went, that was my mom. And if my grandchildren can say, my Nana took me on adventures, I want to die with that.
These experiences you talk about from your traveling, your books, and other things such as your family, how do you think it has shaped you as a woman these days?
I would say that it gave me freedom to be a woman. When it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I was a victim of domestic violence for 8 years, and my life was taken away from me. I saw a picture today that that my ex-husband, it was his 40th birthday, and I made a pot of sauce, and he dumped the sauce inside of the sink, and he walked and he left. And I found that picture today. And I thought about the life that I was living. I thought about that the identity that I didn't have, that I didn't know, because that identity was taken away from me. The words that I was worthless, that I was never going to be anything. I wasn't going to amount to anything. The hitting, the strangling, the taking money away. I lived that life for 8 years of a woman of domestic violence, a victim. And I can see now 15 years later that that doesn't define me. It seems so far away, and it seems like I don't even know that person anymore. And people, when they say, "What? Wait a minute, you were a victim of domestic violence," they don't even see it on my face anymore. And that's growth. That is determination to say my past isn't going to define me. And I think that that's where I'm at in my life, is that this beautiful face has been formed because I've been willing to let it all go and not have my past be my death sentence, and let my past be in my past and allow my beauty to sparkle. I had to write a letter. I was doing a podcast, and the woman said that we had to write a letter at the end of the podcast and read it. We had to write it before the podcast and read it at the end of the podcast. And it was a letter to your younger self. And she always had people write them. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I can do that. I hadn't done that. I've written books, but journal, whatever, and hadn't done that. But I wrote about thanking my younger self for never giving up on her sparkle. That no matter what room she walked into, she was still willing to give her sparkle. And I said, you know what? Because that sparkle that you were willing to still give, even if nobody wanted it, helped me to be the woman at 55 years old to walk into a room and not only sparkled the room, but glittered the room. And because I was able to do that because you never stopped. You never put yourself in a box. So then ourselves at 55 years old isn't in a box. And when I enter a room, I know that I bring destiny. I know that I bring hope. I know that I bring healing. I know that I bring Christ, into those rooms. That's what I'm living. I'm living this sparkle. I'm living the glitter, of life. And I just hope that, when I do pass on, I plan on being cremated, and I want my children and my friends to take part of me, wherever, and take me to places that they know that, that I chose life. And, so whether one of them has to take me, on Route 66 and dump me on Route 66, or somebody's got to take me to the Yukon, or, I want them to know that I lived life. I want them to know that when they drop me off someplace or have me go fly in the ocean or whatever, that my mother was there, or that my friend was there, and she lived life.
I spoke to someone who was also a victim of domestic violence, and they shared that because they felt so trapped inside their home, going out on road trips was a way for them to reclaim some of the essence
Mm.
that they lost. So when you mentioned that, and you're doing the speaking arrangements outside of your city or within your city, you're doing these trips, is that a way for you to reclaim maybe what you couldn't do in a previous time?
I guess I never thought about it before. I know that I'm not fearful, because I will sleep, because I'll travel. Like I had to go to Oklahoma. So Oklahoma for me is 14 and a half hours. So I don't stop halfway in between and get a hotel, because I know that if I get a hotel, I'm not leaving the hotel until 11, 12 o'clock, because I'm not a morning person. So I will stop and sleep at rest stops. Now, my friends and my children are like, are you freaking nuts? I'm like, there's people all along there that are sleeping. Like, so I'm not afraid. It's so funny because I was afraid for 8, 9 years. I was afraid of my own shadow. But I'm sleeping at rest stops, and I'm going to places, that people say, hey, you shouldn't be in this area. And I'm going to those areas with absolutely no fear. I have no fear of sleeping at a rest stop at all. And my children are like, you're nuts. But I think that they had that fear. I had that fear. And I also had that you're never going to do that. You're never going to amount to anything. And for me to be able to travel around the country and only be part of the 8%, that's, I'm going to swear right now, but that's badass. That is badass to be able to do that. So yeah, he didn't, he may have conquered me for 8 years, but I don't give him the permission at all anymore to conquer the rest of my years.
One of the most beautiful and courageous things that I think anyone can do is rediscover themselves. Like you were this person at this point in time, you were this person when you're changing and growing and learning, and now you're this person onward. It's like every, let's say, 10 years is a new identity because it's a new version of yourself. The person you are today, Bambi, how is that going to help you become the person that you want to be, let's say, in another 10 years from now?
And another, because I'm not stopping the progression. I'm not stopping. I'm stopping to smell the roses, but I'm not stopping to feel sorry for myself, anymore. I'm walking forward. I have a lot of life to still live. I have books that I still want to write. I have places that I still want to visit. I have events that I still want to participate in. I still want to speak, and to big crowds, or, to one-on-one women retreats and stuff like that. I have a lot to do, for the kingdom of God. And I don't know when my life is going to end, because life is but a vapor. But there is so much more to do, than just live. I don't want to just live. I want to know how big is the Father's heart. And I want to have how big the Father's heart is. I want it all. When I think about, I don't have a job right now, so I didn't know how this was going to work out, me traveling, and, the retreat that I was going to do, they were going to pay me for my expenses. But other than that, I knew in my heart, I had called one of my friends and I said, I really feel that I need to finish this. I need to finish the 2 states. And she said, Bambi, you're writing a book. So yes, finish it. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know if I have the money to quote unquote waste or whatever. But, I had a dinner party at my house, and somebody left money underneath a soapbox in my bathroom. Somebody sent me a check in the mail. I got a PayPal. Somebody sent me money in my PayPal. Then I had a girlfriend that say, hey, I want to pay for one night of your of your hotel room. And I'm like, thinking, oh my goodness, but God's thinking, no, how big is the Father's heart, Bambi? How big is my heart for you? It's big enough to have you finish Oklahoma and New Mexico. It's big enough for that to happen. So if you have a dream, God's got the finances to take care of it. It may be at the very last minute. It may be at the very last second, because the Bible talks about that Jesus, that he answers things 85 times that he uses the word suddenly. So God likes grand finales. And so sometimes he's not going to give it to us when we think he's going to give it to us, because he loves grand finales. So he wanted me to kind of like hyperventilate a little bit. How am I going to do this? Because he wanted a grand finale. He wanted to show his daughter, hey, I gotcha. Your dreams are also my dreams for you. I gotcha. And so my trip was paid for. That's just amazing to me.
How much more do you value community and people who support you in that way now?
Oh, I've always valued. I am who I am because people have invested in my life. I am a version of every single person that has invested in my life, has spoke into my life, has given up some of their life to give it to me. I am a living testimony that community can change you. I am, I don't have a really good relationship with my mom, and and I went to see her this past summer when I was in New York, being part of a revival. And I went there, but I had no expectations because God had already given me women in my life, her age, that have already poured into my life. So when I went to her house, I wasn't asking for anything. I didn't need anything because I already had all of it. So I was able to just meet her where she's at and accept, where she is in my life and be okay with that because God had already given me all these other women that have spoke incredible life and have raised me to be the person that I am today.
In my 30s, sorry, my 20s, I went through a big change in my life. And I always felt that, man, if this is difficult now, I don't know what I'm going to do in 10 years, 20 years when I'm in my 30s and approaching my 40s. And I was trying to understand the importance of community because I grew up without community. And I tell you, Bambi, once I started to piece together good people, inspirational people, motivational people, people that would help me grow into the man that I wanted to be. My perception and perspective of everything around me changed. The world looked differently. How different is the world to you these days in comparison to maybe when you're going through a more difficult time earlier on?
For me, because, I had a job that I was in people's homes, all day long, sitting and listening to people's stories all day long, for the last 16 years, 15 years of my life, that changed me, you know, that, that changed me a lot because I don't look at, especially media. When media wants to separate us continually, I have been into enough people's homes that I know that the separation isn't as big as everybody wants us to believe. Yeah, there are some jerks. Absolutely, positively there, but it is a minute amount of jerks. But they want us to believe that it's a huge amount of jerks, and it's not. And and people are willing to tell their stories. People are willing to be part of your life. People are willing for you to speak into their life and for you to speak into their lives. People want community, and I think we're finally getting that back after the pandemic. I think the pandemic, we're going to pay consequences for the pandemic for years to come because it really did an injustice to us, not only financially, it did an injustice to us, but it did an injustice to us psychologically and spiritually. It changed the dynamic, and we need to get back. And that's why I'm trying as hard as I can to have people at my home more and more, to have sit at the table, because that's important. Being at a restaurant's great, but there's something about a dining room table into your home, that you're opening up your home. That's who I am, and that's who I want to continue to be. And I want to continue to tell people over and over again that the society has us believing one thing, but I want you to meet people and you'll get a totally different story. You'll get a totally different way of looking at life. Even podcasts. I have been on almost 300 podcasts, in the since last March. So almost a year and a half. I've been almost 300 podcasts. And that's a lot of different people. That's a lot of different walks of life. That's a lot of different, ways of looking at things, So I think that I'm cultured. I think that I'm very cultured. I accept people where they're at. And then I'm somebody that people feel safe to be able to answer my questions too. If I don't understand something, I'm going to ask you. If I don't understand about your culture, I'm going to say, hey, tell me about this. And people aren't afraid to answer, because I'm safe, and they know that I'm not doing it out of a judgment, but I'm doing it out of really care, for people. I've been on that many podcasts that proves that I care about people. I care about who you are. And I just want to continue to be that person.
when I look at like my house, and everyone's house is essentially a form of their, it's an extension of themselves. It's their kingdom, it's their safety and their protection. And there's something very special I found about having people that you trust in your home to either have a conversation, have lunch, have brunch, have dinner, whatever the purpose of the gathering is, that maybe you don't get in a restaurant or somewhere else. And I didn't appreciate it enough until I made changes in my life where peace and happiness was the focus,
Mm.
right? Because there's a lot of times years ago I would spend an almost similar amount of time within my house that I spent outside of it, right? So you're at the events, maybe the parties, the bars, whatever you're using to distract you, because that's what it was in hindsight, a distraction. These days, do you see some people struggling with identifying what is a distraction in their life and what is maybe a benefit?
Absolutely. And I think that has something to do. I really do think that has to do with the pandemic. It really, it it really shook. It was like it felt kind of like an earthquake or a hurricane. Like it did damage that people are trying to rebuild, but yet in a way they don't want to be the person because the Bible talks about turning ashes into beauty, and when God turns the ashes into beauty, you get to redesign, you get to remodel, you get to get rid of the old things and add some new things. And I think that that's what's happening, is that people's identity has been shifted, and so they're trying to figure out who they know who they were before the pandemic, but now they don't know who they are after the pandemic, and they can't seem to get up and go. They can't seem to get on that horse again, because it's like they're walking. I think that the majority of people are walking around in fear, wondering if they come back and they rebuild, is somebody going to take it away from them again? It's kind of like a person that lives in the hurricane season, like in Florida. They're rebuilding, but are they rebuilding, to grander, or are they just rebuilding because they're afraid it's going to happen again? And I think that people aren't putting, I just happen to say, you know what, the pandemic kind of like ruined us. And I'm jumping in with both feet and saying, I don't give a crap. I'm going to live life. I'm going to sparkle in a room. But I don't think that everybody is capable of doing that or wants to do that, because now they've grown comfortable. They kind of like grown comfortable in their trauma now, and they've attached their trauma and become best friends with their trauma now. And they don't know how to get another best friend.
Would you then say that people are living a life that isn't their own, but a life that maybe others or society tells them to live?
I think that we've come to that point, and then plus you have to look too. I think too is because the economy has changed so dramatically. Economics has changed so dramatically. The stock market has changed so dramatically. The government, our politics have changed. So, we can't have a conversation about our politics anymore. I can't tell you who I voted for. You can't tell me who you voted for, because you automatically now have this preconceived idea of who I am. We can no longer talk about these issues. We can't talk about religion anymore. We can't sit at the table and carry on conversations. I can't say I voted for this person and you voted for this person and not start an argument. It's like there's no safety anymore. And so people choose not to build conversations because there's no safety in those conversations anymore. So I think that people have stopped living authentically. And then they're now finding ways to blame everything on everybody. I think that we are a society that we are therapeutic out. We have had enough therapy up to our yin yang. And now therapists are telling this younger generation that your parents did such a shitty job for you that now you need to get rid of your parents. You need to move them away. They're like telling you now, oh, your parents don't deserve to have your grandchildren anymore. We're going to move away from here. We're building this society of division. And, and of segregation, if we think segregation was bad between black and white, segregation is worse now because it's so many different components. If that makes any sense, it's everything's being segregated. So now you're afraid to even have one conversation or say something just out of line. And we need to get back to to being authentic and being able to be true.
There's a time, not that long ago actually, where your neighbor can be different in so many ways, right? Could be different hair color, eye color, skin color, shoes, whatever it was, right? Like they were different, and you had neighborhoods where people were different within the neighborhood. It seems these days a lot of people are struggling to be able to accept and embrace the differences. And many of us, as we get older, there's some things that we shouldn't be giving energy and life to, such as the division, such as toxic behaviors.
Right.
What are some of the ways that maybe you've observed that people are getting lost in some of the things that are preventing them from ultimately finding peace and happiness in their day-to-day lives?
Well, I mean, you can, people use the whole thing of social media, how social media has, become the source of what people think life is about, but what I've told people too is that, here you see a picture on social media. Ask the question before you see this perfect picture, this perfect family, and you think, oh my goodness, I can never be this perfect. Ask the mother how she was 10 minutes prior to this picture being taken, and you'll know the real truth. And why do we need to pretend? We all know that we put our pants on all the same way. We all know that we all have to crap and pee. We all know that life sucks at times. We all know that. Why can't we just acknowledge that? Why can't, somebody asked me what was my superpower one time, and I said vulnerability. I don't care. People ask me on podcasts, hey, is there anything that you don't want me to ask you? No. You can ask me whatever you want. I'm on your podcast. I don't care. But why can't we all be that way? Why do you have to say that if I did this, then it's this? Why can't we just be honest? Your life is about valleys and mountains. And what I just told somebody just recently, that there's going to be moments that you're in the valley, but in the valley is preparing you for the mountain, because in the valley, that's where the creek, the stream is, that's where the lush grass is, and that's where the shade is, and the fruit and the thing, but it's preparing you for the mountain, and it's preparing you for the climb, because the climb is treacherous. The climb is going to take your breath away because you're going up and the gravity is changing. You're going to be dehydrated. You're going to be clawing your way. You're going to get black and blue on your knees. You may be falling at sometimes. And so you're being prepared for the climb. And then you get up to the horizon. You get up to the mountain. Well, there's really nothing on the mountain except for the horizon, that you see how far you've come. But you got to get back down the mountain. And you're going to do it again and again. And that's what life is. Life is, you're in the valley, or you're climbing, or you're on the mountaintop, or you're on the mountaintop and you're going back down, and then you're into the valley. That's everybody, good and bad, running the same track. Why can't we just admit it? Why can't we just admit it? I don't understand. Why can't we just be authentic and say 10 minutes, this picture looks really great because 10 minutes earlier, I was screaming and yelling at my children, and I had to change their clothing 2 different times. I had to go find Johnny's shoes. I had to fix Sally's hair for the 3rd time because she won't keep the bow in. Why can't we just talk about that? Why do we have to convince everybody that that picture that we have is what our life is when it's not? Just be real. It's so much better to be real. It's so much better to get the skeletons out of the closet, because then you have nothing to use against me.
I have a few people we're no longer friends at this point because we're acquaintances, and they've fallen into that trap where they're pretending to be something that they're not, or looking back, maybe they were always this way and I just didn't realize it until you get wiser as you age, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, these are strands of wisdom and experience. So they've fully transformed, either emotionally, or maybe I'm just seeing them in a different way. And they've become people that I can't have in my life anymore. And they're very destructive and chaotic. And I share this experience because I realize at this stage in my life, I no longer have the fear or the hesitation to be my authentic self. And that can mean that I lose friends, I lose family members, I lose people around me.
Mhm.
Do you think then that people, as we get older, because we potentially have more to lose, we don't want to embrace being our authentic self?
That's a good question because I don't want to ever be that. I don't ever want to not be authentic. So, and you see, I am who I am. And I've always been this way. I've always been the black sheep, that enters a room and wants to talk about the elephant that's in the corner that everybody just keeps walking around. I have always been that person that says, hey, let's talk about that elephant. Now, I may not have people in my life that want to talk about that elephant, so they walk away, but I'm still going to bring up the elephant. I'm still going to go into the atmosphere and say, hey, why do we have that elephant over there and nobody's saying anything, but yet you guys are just putting your shirt, your jackets on them? Oh, Bambi, leave that alone. Leave that alone. I'm just an authentic person. And when people say, oh, social media does this, then get off of social media. Oh, my parents did this. Okay, then forgive your parents and have children of your own and realize that your parents are the best they possibly could do. And you're not going to do any better. You may do some things that are going to be better, as parenting, but at the end of the day, if you have any children at all, one will probably like you and the other one won't. So get off your high horse. Stop thinking that your parents did a terrible job. Let's just go back to respecting people. Let's go back to not wondering, oh my goodness, why do they do that? Let's go back to ask the question, I wonder what their story is. Because their stories are why they react the way that they react. So let's stop getting ourselves on the high horse, thinking that it will never happen to us, because the Bible's pretty clear that says, but the grace of God go I, and to walk it out with people. And there are some people that, yeah, we just don't click. And I'm okay with not clicking with everybody, because the older you get, the smaller your crowd is, because you just continue to start knowing who you can trust and who you really want to spend time with. And it's not about quality anymore. It's not about quantity anymore. It's about quality.
Do you think some people confuse the two between quantity of people and the quality of people?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, this past weekend, I was asked to be part of this event 4 or 5 months ago. And so I thought, oh my goodness, God, you have done such a great work in my life. There's going to be tons of people that are going to show up. There's going to be, they're going to have to get a new building because there's going to be so many people that are going to show up. So I was pretty much on my high horse. And then we realized that people were dropping like they were dropping out of being part of this event. And even um, two of the speakers dropped out. And I realized over the weekend, at first I was mad. At first I was like, God, are you really showing up? But he brought the people there that needed the hope. And God multiplies. God is a multiplier. So even if 5 people were there, that's still touching 10 people. And then that's still touching 15 people. But we get caught up and we think it has something to do with me. I took it upon myself thinking that God didn't love me enough to send, all these people so I could minister to. God sent who needed me, and he sent the people that I needed. So it was more about the quality of people that he sent and the quality of what I can do with this small group that he gave to me. I wouldn't have been able to do what I did this past weekend if there was a whole bunch of people there that really were only there just to relax and not there to be ministered to. So that was my prime example. Like, I just thought God was like punishing me. Like, are you kidding me? I've been, you know, he's opened up doors for me. And I'm thinking, why does Joyce Myers get 5,000 people and Bambi only gets 10, kind of thing. But the 10 that he brought were the ones that needed that one-on-one time. And they needed Bambi in the quaint setting and not this big setting.
You mentioned earlier about community and you mentioned as well as the identity of the person. And I do have one last question as we close. I want to give you
We're
three.
closing? No
We're
way.
closing, I know, right? I want to give you three wishes for this question, Bambi. What are three things you wish people knew about their self-worth as they get older and why?
Oh, I would want people to know that anything that they had gone through in their life, there's a purpose of who they are today, and that there is no mistake on where they came from, what family they were raised in, what hurt they've experienced, because God uses it all. And if we could just set it at the foot of the cross and allow Him to pick it up and hang on to the hem of His garment, oh my goodness, we would not look at our lives as a death sentence. And I know for many years, I looked at my life as a death sentence. I looked at my life as if God didn't love me. I spent 8 years as a victim of domestic violence. I thought God didn't hear me. I spent 8 years with a man that cheated on me continually. I thought God didn't hear me. I had a dream at 28 years old, and I'm 55 years old and just now seeing it come to pass. And I thought that God didn't love me. And his love for me is so unconditional that He took me on this journey. He took me on the journey of discovering and understanding the depth of His love. And if we could understand just one drop of the blood that was shed on Calvary for each and every one of us, if we could just understand just one touch of His garment and how we can be set free, I want people to understand and to know that He's a loving, loving God.